Everyone.
Morning.
Pursuant to the notice on September 30th, the committee meets to consider legislation, and I note the presence of quorum. I want to thank all the members for coming. This is a great attendance and pretty much on time for the Senate, so I appreciate that. Again, I want to thank all the members. I want to thank their staff for really working pretty hard in between markups here, trying to find that sweet spot of areas of agreement. We've got, I think, 11 pieces of legislation. We've got one resolution. A lot of these are going to be, hopefully just voice voted because we found that those areas of agreement. This is, I think, the first markup we're really going to start trying to address regulatory reform. And I do want to just, basically state that, one thing certainly coming from the private sector, coming from manufacturing, where you're always reviewing what you do as a business, and you're always taking a look at the things you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, so it leaves time for you to do the things you should be doing, if that makes sense. One thing I certainly noticed coming here in Washington, D.C. is pretty much everything here is additive. We just keep adding layer upon layer upon layer, which why I think this administration realizes, OIRA, taking a look at cost-benefit of new regulations, and that's a good thing in terms of preemptively analyzing regulations to make sure their costs, hopefully, or their benefits dramatically outweigh their costs. But we also do need to come up with a subtractive process, and we've got a couple pieces. We got one particularly that is really targeted toward that. But I guess what I'd like to do is let's start with as much agreement as we have on a piece of regulatory legislation, and I'd like to start with the S-1607. Independent Agency Regulatory Analysis Act of 2015. I guess actually I should really ask if this ranking member would like to have an opening statement. Sorry about that.
Yes, I would. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Our thanks to you. I really want to thank our staff, sir. A lot of people have worked very hard on both sides to try to see if we can find the middle on a couple of actually fairly contentious issues. In some cases we've succeeded, in other cases we haven't, but the spirit has been good. Among the bills we're going to be considered today is a bipartisan bill. Title of it's Fraud Reduction and Data Analytics Act, sponsored by the chairman, myself, Senators Tillis, Senator McCaskill. I would just say this is pretty good stuff. Some of the legislation I introduced is not that valuable. This is good. And for anybody, I would just say if anybody wants to take a look at this and you'd like to be out as a co-sponsor, you will not regret it. I don't think, well, Carver gave you some good advice at least once. But the bill would require stronger financial controls for federal programs that would help agencies better identify and prevent fraud. These new financial controls would be based on new standards released in July by the Governmental Accountability Office. Those standards are actually based on successful practices in the private sector. The bill would also strengthen accountability through regular reports that Congress can use to better target our oversight of anti-fraud efforts. And finally, the legislation would foster the sharing among federal agencies of best practices in combating fraud, including for the use and development of cutting-edge data analysis that can help spot efforts to scam government programs or misuse federal funds. I think this is common sense legislation. It's bipartisan. I'd urge you to join us in supporting this bill, not just by voting for it, but join us as a co-sponsor if you see fit. I'm also pleased that the agenda today includes the Fair Chances Act, sponsored by Senators Booker and the chairman, and I think others. I just told him in a hearing, Senator Booker and I were in a hearing at Environment and Public Works, and I went over to him, I told him I was going to oppose his bill. I thought that most of us would oppose his bill, and he said, really? And I said, no, not really. We thank you for introducing the legislation, happy to support it. And a lot of people that have a criminal record, they've straightened their lives up, they've been flying straight, and they'd like to be able to get a job, a decent job, and be productive citizens. And I think what you proposed here is something states are doing, and I think it will be a big help to us. We also have some, as the chairman has said, a number of bills that deal with regulation and the way we approach regulation. Some of our most thoughtful members have offered and crafted this legislation, and I'm going to oppose not all of them, but a number of the pieces of legislation. Several of them, I've been working on this, and as Senator Lankford knows, he and I were on the phone late last night, trying to find common ground on a couple of his bills. And I said that I have amendments to offer on one on each of the bills. If they could be accepted, I'd be able to support this legislation. We've agreed, I'll offer the amendments. he will not accept them. And we'll live to, not to fight another day, but to work together to hopefully find common ground. Angus King is, as I think most of you know, Angus is a great guy, a great member here, great governor, and he has proposed a piece of legislation I just feel is just wrong and wrong-headed. I'd say that if it was in a room, but I just just can't see my way. We have a fundamental disagreement. What he's proposed here is a BRAC-like approach. A BRAC-like approach to regulations. Here's the way BRAC works. I'm a big supporter of BRAC. I've always supported BRAC. The folks that are going to the BRAC Commission stuff actually came in, the Secretary of Defense came in and said, we're going to take all the airplanes away from the C-130 aircraft, away from the Delaware National Guard. Take them all away. And we're going to put some of them in North Carolina. We're going to put some of them in Georgia. And we had the right to appeal. We had a right to appeal to a 9-member commission. And the nine-member commission that we appealed to said, that makes no sense. It doesn't save money. It doesn't enhance readiness. It makes no sense. That's where the decision was reversed. That is a totally different approach than what we have envisioned and embodied in this legislation. Here's the way we do affect and help shape regulation. One, we do it by writing clear legislation. Not ambiguous legislation, but clear legislation. We do it in not just in the colloquies we have in a markup, but we do it in report language of the bills we report out of committee. We do it in the way we debate on the floor, the colloquies that we have on the floor, explaining what our intent is. We do it in conference. We do it in conference report language that comes out of a conference report. We provide, when agencies say they're going to write rules on the bills that we've passed, we have the opportunity to provide input. We have the opportunity to provide input to the regulators, ourselves, on behalf of our constituents, and to even arrange meetings and telephone calls so that our constituents or folks that are interested in these rules have a chance to provide input. We have the opportunity to submit comment on draft rules. We have the opportunity for extended comment periods. I just was involved, some of you too, in getting the Department of Labor to extend the comment period on fiduciary rulemaking that they were going through. We have the opportunity to join in the friend of the court lawsuits, amicus briefs. I'm a lawyer, but I've done this sort of thing, and I know others of you have as well. We can ask OIRA to expedite review regulations. We think there's a reg that they're maybe not planning to review. We can ask them to do that. We can't mandate it, but in the last couple of years, Mr. Chairman, the last couple of years, I asked, how much of retrospective review has OIRA actually done? Started under Cass Sunstein at the direction of the President. And as it turns out, according to the most recent update from OMB, federal agencies have now completed, get this, over 175 retrospective initiatives, which are expected to yield $22 billion in savings over the next 5 years. And finally, when regs are adopted that we don't like, that we think are faulty, we can hold hearings. We can hold hearings. We can expose these rules. We can bring in OIRA and say, why don't you work on this particular regulation? So I would just say, for all those reasons, I'm not able to support Angus's. Don't tell him I said the nice things about him, but just that he really opposed your bill because he thought it was not well thought out. And I just explained some of the reasons I don't think it's necessary. But I look forward to finding common ground in, where we can, and in some places not. Last one I want to say. Our friend Jeff Flake has a sensitive Senate resolution on streamlining, which he and I have discussed it. We've met. I literally went to his office, and I said, here's concerns that have been voiced about your regulation, your proposal. Let's see if we can't work with DHS, if we can't work with the Department of Justice, and find a more thoughtful approach here, rather than just a sense of the Senate resolution. So we're going to do that. We're going to vote on his resolution. I'm not going to support it, but what we will do is we'll work together going forward with those two agencies and hopefully come up with something that's even better. All right, Mr. Chairman, I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carpenter. I'll apologize for almost forgetting you, but I was so impressed we had not only quorum, but a voting quorum. I wanted to move quickly to take advantage of it, because I know a number of members have important Armed Services Committee meeting as well that they're torn. So I guess I would just ask, before we lose voting quorums, that you let the chair know that, so we can proceed to any kind of votes that may be outstanding. And so with this, the committee will proceed to the consideration of S-1607, Independent Agency Regulatory Analysis Act of 2015. Again, I think this is one of these bipartisan efforts, good government, types of analysis that we really should be providing to independent agencies that we are currently providing to the non-independent agencies. And Senator Portman is the leader on this, so I'll turn to Senator Portman.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your willingness to hold this markup today and for your support of us moving forward in this legislation. This is something we've been working on the last few years, working closely with Senator Warner, who's my co-sponsor, but also members of this committee. And I want to thank Senator Heitkamp in particular for her work on this, and Senator McCaskill. We've gotten a lot of input, and we've made changes to the legislation because of that. Here's the bottom line. Independent agencies are taking a bigger and bigger role in terms of major rules. This only applies to major rules, not to every rule. And all we're saying is that there ought to be an advisory analysis done by the same group that analyzes all the rules from the executive branch agencies, and that's OIRA under the Office of the Management and Budget. This is something that a lot of people have talked about over the years. You mentioned Cass Sunstein a minute ago, Senator Carper, and as you know, he's someone who wrote about this years ago, even before he became OIRA director, saying it was important to have independent agencies be brought under the cost-benefit analysis structure that you have for other agencies and departments. And by the way, the President of the United States, through an executive order, has said they should do it. So in a sense, this is codifying what the President would like to do. It's also a recommendation of the President's Jobs Council. So this is something that, again, we've worked on